Welcome to Adequate 360 Boss Guides for Sunwell Plateau. In this video, we'll be going over Brutallus as the second boss in the raid. As a single phase encounter deals a brutal amount of damage to the tanks and the raid. In the current TPC meta, I would consider this boss to be more of a healer check than a DPS check. However, the raid must maintain an average of 29k raid DPS to kill the boss before it goes berserk at 6 minutes. Raid composition. Raid composition for this fight is going to be 2 tanks, 7-8 healers, and a solid mix of DPS. You want to bring all adequate debuffs to minimize the damage the boss does to your tanks, while also maximizing raid DPS against them. You'd be surprised at how much solid uptime on debuffs affects the boss and the raid. Having a solid mix of ranged and melee DPS in this fight makes it easier to split up groups for meteor slash and allows for a variety of damage on the boss. Let's talk about some boss abilities here. Burn. Debuff is placed on the player in that lasts 60 seconds, and spreads to targets near the afflicted player. This will deal increased fire damage over the duration of the debuff, and really starts hitting hard the last 15 to 20 seconds. Weakauras in the description will help notify the healers when burn targets need to be focused. If you have burn, you will run to a designated burn area, and make sure that you don't spread burn to players around you. The radius for this is about 2 yards, but I would really encourage everyone to maintain 5 yards at a minimum to prevent spreading it. You can remove burn with Cloak of Shadows, Divine Shield, and Ice Block. Meteor Slash. This deals damage to all targets up to 65 yards in front of the boss. It stacks and increases the fire damage you take by 75%. You want to form a pizza slice in front of the boss and help split this damage. I recommend around 7-8 players minimum to absorb the damage. Tanks will swap on 3 stacks of Meteor Slash. Thump. Deals a large amount of damage and reduces the target's armor by 50%. This will also remove burn if it's on the tank. There's a couple strategies to deal with this mechanic. Strategy 1. You can overheal through the stomp and continue to taunt swap normally. Strategy 2. Try to have the tank not currently on the boss taunt and take the stomp, and then taunt back for the Meteor Slash. This requires coordination and timing, and realize if a taunt fails, it will mess up Meteor Slash on the group. Strategy 3. Have a third tank taunt and take the stomp, and lets the other 2 tanks take Meteor Slashes normally. I personally recommend strat number 1 or 2, but all of them are viable and will help secure an adequate boss kill. Talk about tanking for this fight. Your tank should be in heavy mitigation gear and gemmed for max health pool. Make sure that each tank has Commanding Shout and an active trinket to use whenever they have the Stomp debuff. Bears and Prot Warriors are the favorite tanks to this fight due to their heavy mitigation and health pool. Prot Warriors do have a bit of an edge here due to the shield wall and last stand for progression, but remember they do have some issues on threat. For pull, remember all tanks are going to be in dad gear, but this boss is tauntable, so you can compensate for any threat pulls. This boss is not crush or parry haste, so keep in mind that all damage on tanks is extremely high, but consistent throughout the encounter. For your tank, you should focus on keeping consumes rolling at all times, using Hellstones and Nightmare Seeds, and being vocal about tank swaps. If you get a taunt resist during the taunt swap, make sure you quickly use an alternative taunt such as Mocking Blow or Challenging Shout. You want to taunt every 3 stacks of Meteor Slash, and there's a weakauras in the description to help track the stacks on the tanks. As a side note, remember Stomp does remove burn from the tank if he happens to get it, but you need to call for extra heals while you still have burn on you. Stomp and Meteor Slash timings line up so that you're sometimes able to take a stomp before the other tank taunts for Meteor Slash. Healers. Your healers should be about 7-8 healers for this fight, and I recommend having at least 1 Resto Druid. Holy Paladins are also great for this fight if they continue to run the heavy int Holy Light build, and they can top off tanks and burn targets easily. As with most fights in Sunwell, you need to just bring as many Resto Shamans as you can find since they can chain heal their way to greatness and adequate boss skills. 1 Resto Druid and 1 Holy Paladin can keep up any burn target, and chain heals can cover burn targets and melee if they're staying close enough for the bounce. The last 10 seconds of the burn are where a target takes the most damage, but again, the weakauras can help you track that. Healers should focus on maximizing heals while conserving mana over the 6-minute fights. Make sure you mana pot early and often. Your Prot Paladin should throw on a full set of healing gear for this fight and help heal. If you can go respec, that'd be best, but if not, you can just beat the 8th healer that way. Make sure the tanks are always lathered up with hots and shields before each tank's transition, and overheal them if they have the Stomp debuff. Have clear healing assignments set before you pull the boss, and stick to your assignments through the fight. It'll really help with the healing. Let's talk about DPS players. Major responsibilities for DPS players in this boss is just maximizing your rotation, consumes, and debuffs on the boss. Don't spread burn to other players, and make sure you're within chain heal bounce while you're zugging. Top yourself off with a Hellstone before the Meteor Slash. You can see that the whole group is low on health. Melee are able to position themselves into the boss as well, so optimize the space you have to give burn targets room to move around you. Strategy for this boss is simple, and it really comes down to positioning. The pull is, I've seen this boss pulled into different positions now, but I like to start him where we congregate in order to buff up. You can also tank the boss where he stands. The problem with that though is that you need to move the raid towards him. Whatever you decide to do, just pick a spot that your raid is comfortable with. Once you have a position, stay with it for the duration of prog unless you absolutely need to move. Make sure that all players are properly positioned before the pull, and make sure that they're behind each tank in their group. Have them offset so they don't accidentally take meteor slashes from the other group. I would recommend to be less than 180 degrees. Have all players in the group maintain at least 5 yards distance from each other so they don't spread burn if it's applied, but can still be chain healed effectively. Misdirect the boss on pull, and you'll want to wait for the boss to get in position before you lust. The boss is tauntable, so if one of your hunters decides to go too hard, you can always pull it back off him. Let the first tank start, and if you're the second tank, just wait a second before generating threat. You don't want to pull threat as a second tank and have the meteor slashes desynced, because it will cause issues on the fight. Once the fight starts, all players are just planning and following their assignments. The raid leaders of tanks should count down before the tank swap every 3 meteor slashes. I personally would do a 3-2-1, so the healers have time to lather up the new tank with hots and shields, and adjust their positioning. This is a scripted fight, so once you get the pattern down, you'll progress on it quickly. Keep an eye around you for burn targets, and try to move out of their way so they don't spread it to you. This gives them room to maneuver as well. There's a backup burn spot in between the 2 meteor slash groups, but you should use this as a last resort, as you can easily die to a meteor slash and burn combo if you're not paying attention to the boss positioning. If you're getting close to a kill and the boss enrages, don't panic. Completely adequate if you spread out and burn the boss down while it runs to different targets. Try to kite him and secure the first kill for your guild. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have an adequate kill.